Welcome to Binge Breakthrough, the podcast designed to help you finally break through the barriers that keep you stuck, feeling out of control around food. I'm Master Certified Coach Jane Pilger, and I want you to know that no matter how long you've been struggling or what you've tried, food freedom is possible, and I'm here to show you how. After years of therapy, eating disorders treatment, restrictive diets, and reading all the books, I was still stuck in the on-again, off-again cycle of restricting and binging until I was able to see it all from a new perspective that changed everything. Each week, I will share the strategies, tools, and mindset that allowed me to overcome my decades-long battle with binge eating. Your journey to body trust starts now. Let's dive in. Hello, trusted listener. Welcome to Binge Breakthrough. I consider you a trusted listener because I trust that you are here for a reason. I trust that you are going to hear something today that is insightful and impactful on your journey with food. So if you are listening to this episode when it comes out live, it is the first week in January. It is a new year. And what's happening everywhere is a lot of talk about what's going to be different. What are we going to do differently? Which I love. I love thinking about what will this year look like. I love creating a vision for myself for the year to come. I love creating intentions and ideas and giving my brain something to build towards, giving my brain something for the GPS in my brain. Where are we going? I love to do that. I think this is a beautiful time of year to really think about, what do I want to create for myself in the new year? So I invite you to do the same. And this episode is going to help you really think about, what do I want to create for myself in this year? Or whenever you might be listening to this episode, you could be listening to this episode in July. You can always ask yourself the question, what do I want to create for myself? Now, I want to tell you why this is so different than what are my goals? What am I going to do? If you are listening to this in early January, the other thing that you're hearing a lot is talk about losing weight, talk about cutting things out, going on a detox, removing certain things from your diet, whatever it is. There is a lot in the air right now about the things we need to cut out, the things we need to change, and what can happen, especially for a brain and a nervous system that has a long history of dieting, of restricting and binging, is this type of messaging that is literally everywhere can lead to mental restriction and it can lead to physical restriction. So mental restriction sounds like, I'm going to kind of the ideas of, I'm going to take this out. I can't have that. That's bad. The physical restriction is when we actually do start trying to eat less. We're trying to remove and take things out from this place of thinking that they're bad and we don't want them. So when this restriction happens, restriction is one of the primary causes of binge eating. So here we have this desire to stop binging, this desire to really change our relationship with food. But what we're doing is unintentionally creating the very thing we're trying to stop. So just get curious for yourself. I know for me, there has been a very consistent pattern of, in the beginning of the year, if I look back at my journals, I can see in the very beginning of the year this consistent pattern of binging in the first few days of January. And it's precisely because there's all these messages out there. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to take this out. This is the year that I'm going to change all of these things. And it leads to the mental and physical restriction. So get curious for yourself. What happens with your eating at this time of year? Do you maybe have a few days where you're like, all right, this is going to be different. And then the next thing you know, you're back into your pattern? If so, just know there is nothing wrong with you. It makes sense. And what I want to share with you today is an example of a different way to think about things, a different way that you can really look at this year if you are listening to this in January. And no matter when you are listening to this, how you can use what we're going to talk about is really how you can use your energy as your guide. And I was inspired by this podcast episode. This past week, I am recording this in early January. So this past week, I've been doing a lot of work with my clients, both my one-on-one clients and in my Cultivate group. We've been talking a lot about 2024. What is the story we want to tell about 2024? How are we going to remember 2024? And then what are we going to create for ourselves? What is the intention for what I want for myself in 2025? And as I was having a lot of conversations this week about this, I had one conversation in particular that is really inspiring this episode. And I want to just let you know, whenever I share a client story, whether I'm sharing a story here on this podcast, whether it's a story from my new book, The Binge Eating Breakthrough, which is available on Amazon, or if it's something on my website, I want you to know any story that I share is shared with permission. I always ask for permission to share any stories. And the reason that I want you to know this is if you are thinking about the possibility of working with me now, in the future, anytime, and you hear me talking about stories, talking about something that I talked about with my client, you might have a little, I don't want her, if I work with her and I'm telling her stories, I don't want her telling these stories to anybody else. Just know I only share with permission. There are so many client stories I do not share. I will not share. You have 100% safety and confidentiality in working with me. I have a lot of clients who that privacy, that safety is very important for them. And so I just want you to know that is very important to me too. Sometimes I will share stories with no names involved. Sometimes I will share stories and I will use a name. I always ask my clients about names. You will see I never use a last name. Sometimes I'll use a first name and a last initial. And sometimes that first name is actually their name. And sometimes they ask me to change their first name and I let them choose what name they want. So just know that is the case for any stories that I'm sharing. All right. So in this particular case, I was working with one of my one-on-one clients and we were talking about both the 2024, what's the story of 2024? How will you remember it? This is important. It's important for you to know how you want to tell the story. How do you want to remember a year? If, for example, you look back at 2024 and you're like, oh, I failed. I didn't do anything. I didn't do what I said I was going to do. I didn't reach my goals. There's a lot of going back to this concept of energy that we're going to dive into. There's a lot of negative energy in that story of 2024. And I can promise you, no matter what happened to you in 2024, there is a way to look at 2024 and tell it in a way that doesn't have a lot of negative energy to it. I promise you, it does not have to be black and white, all or nothing, all bad. It wasn't all bad and it wasn't all good. The human experience isn't that way. But what do you want to remember? What do you want to focus on? So we do that with 2024. It's really important. Then we go into 2025 and we go through a series of questions that really kind of helps us create this vision. What do you want to create for yourself? And in that vision, we talk about really after answering a series of questions, what do you want to experience more of? What do you want to experience less of? What are you willing and ready to let go of this year? Then we look at, okay, based on all of this, what skills am I going to need to learn? If I know I'm ready to let go, let's say you're ready to let go of binge eating this year. Well, what skills are you going to have to learn? You're going to have to learn how to navigate your urges, your desires, the desire to escape, to disconnect with food. You're going to have to learn the skills. What are you going to have to believe? You're going to have to believe that it is possible for you to stop binge eating. So we go through, what are you going to have to learn? What are you going to have to believe? Then, with all of these questions answered, the next question becomes, what intention do you have? What is your word for the year of 2025? We can look at all of this together, and we can look at a series of different words to kind of come up with your word of the year. I love this idea of a word of the year because it gives your brain this place to focus. So in last week's podcast episode, I talked about 5 things you need to end binge eating this year. And number one of them, I think it was number 1, is to set intentions and not goals. So this is really going along with that. Setting an intention for the year can be your word for the year. So with this client, we went through the questions and we were talking about her word for the year. Now, we brainstormed a bunch of different words. And one of the words that we really talked about a lot that inspired this podcast episode is the word energy. And as we talked about energy, what we were talking about is how you can really use your energy as a compass to kind of guide you towards where you want to go. So you kind of decide, what energy do I want to bring into this experience? The other thing that's amazing about energy is your energy can also be a barometer. It can help tell you what is working, what isn't working. So your energy, it can be both a compass and a barometer. So let's talk a little bit more about energy in general, and then we'll get back to this idea of having a word for the year or an intention for the year. But let's go back to energy. So in energy, there's really 2 primary sources of energy. We have our physical energy, which is impacted by our sleep, by our nutrition, by our overall stress, by our hormones. We've certainly, as somebody who is postmenopausal currently, our physical energy is absolutely impacted by the change of hormones as we age. Our movement, the overall movement that we get, our physical energy is absolutely a very important component of energy. We also have our emotional energy. Our emotions, what are we thinking about? What are we feeling? What is the internal dialogue? It's kind of like the overall emotional energy. So the 2 different sources of energy are so important to look at when we are thinking about food, when we're thinking about even specifically binge eating, even if not binge eating, but your patterns with food. So if, for example, I know for me, when my physical energy is low, when I am very tired, what happens? My body often initiates more cravings for high density foods. Because if I'm not getting the sleep that I need, it's like, oh, well, we can get that energy somewhere else. So that is going to impact the cravings and what my body is signaling and asking for. We can also look at kind of that emotional energy. If I am feeling really overwhelmed, if I'm feeling like something is really hard, or I'm feeling powerless or hopeless, I am more likely to want to disconnect with food. A lot of times my emotional energy is also going to line up with what's happening in my nervous system. So we can kind of look at all of this energy and think about for yourself with your eating patterns, when you show up with food in ways that you don't prefer, what are typically kind of the signs and the signals? What's happening for you generally energetically? A lot of people struggle more when they are physically tired. A lot of people struggle more when they are in overwhelm, when they're in doubt, when they're in fear. So there can kind of be those patterns there. So where we start with this is awareness. I talk about this a lot. Awareness is always the first step to change. So right now, as you are listening to this, just pause. Take a moment and check in. What is your current energy state? And think about it in the two places. What is my physical energy right now? How do I feel physically in my body? Just overall, how do I feel? How does my body physically feel? And how about my emotional energy? What is kind of my state, the state of my emotional state? Do I feel really overwhelmed? Do I feel uncertain? Do I feel curious? Do I feel open? Do I feel excited? What is my current emotional state? Now, what we can do, so if we're looking at energy and we're looking at energy as both a compass and a barometer, we start to get curious about awareness. What do I know about my patterns? What do I know about what's common for me before, during, and after a binge or an overeating, an episode of eating where I disconnect with myself? So for example, it's like before, for some people, if I know that before, some of my patterns are feeling overwhelmed, feeling uncertain, feeling hopeless. If I can start to notice those before, that's my barometer. Oh, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Then I can develop a plan of what I want to do when I start to notice that happening. The overwhelm doesn't cause the binging, but the overwhelm leads me to thinking I can't handle this. It's too much. And when I think I can't handle it, then I go into my protective mechanism of when things feel too hard, this is what I do. So, but if I can start to notice that ahead of time, then I can interrupt the pattern before the pattern starts. So it can become my barometer. Oh, I notice this is happening for me. Now I can make a shift. So you start to get to notice with here's the practice for you. Start to notice and get curious about what gives you energy and what drains your energy. You might even just keep a little list. Either if you're somebody who likes to journal, create a new page. If you're somebody who likes to just jot notes into your app on your phone or your computer, you can have 2 columns. What gives me energy? What drains the energy? And just notice, oh, wow, when I was doing XYZ, I felt really energetic. Oh, and this time I was feeling my energy was really not aligned. It wasn't where I wanted to be. Now, this is very powerful, but here's what you have to be careful of. Be careful that you don't assign the energy drain or increase to the thing itself. So for example, I might say, when I ride my bike, I generally have the type of energy I want. I love the type of energy. I'm really lit up. I love the energy. I love when I'm able to kind of think about new things when I ride my bike. But that right there would make me think the bike is what creates the energy. And that's actually not what's happening. What's happening is what I'm thinking about, the space I'm giving myself, the internal dialogue, everything that's happening when I'm on the bike, that's really what's creating the energy. It's not the bike itself. Because if it was the bike itself, every single time I rode the bike, I would feel the exact same way. And that's not what happens. As this relates to food, so many people say, oh, it's the food. The food is causing the problem, so I just need to take that particular food out, then I will be okay. If that were the case, every single time you ate the food, you would feel the exact same way. And we know that's not the case. But your energy will give you a lot of clues. And as I was talking to this client, she said, it's not even that I want to feel, as we talked about the word energy, she said, it's not even that I want to feel energetic all the time, because I don't. But if I know what energy I want for any particular situation, if I'm not feeling that level of energy, that becomes my clue something else is going on. So for example, if I want to feel uh, encouraged, if I want to feel inspired, if I want to feel committed to let's say a work project, but I notice when I get to work, all I'm feeling is stress and overwhelm, and I'm feeling not supported, whatever it is I'm feeling at work, that doesn't align with what I want. So what that shows me, there's my barometer. There's my kind of indicator light that says something is going on here. Now, if you've been listening to me for a while, you know I talk about binges are like lights on the dashboard. They tell us what's going on underneath. Something is going on underneath the hood, so we can get under the hood and see what's going on. It's the same with our energy. Our energy is our barometer. When our energy doesn't line up with what we want for ourselves, it tells us something is going on, so it gives us a place to look for. So we can use your energy as your guide. And I love doing this instead of having rules around food, rules around what you will or won't do, what you will eat or what you won't eat. So for example, here's some examples for you. Before a social event, let's say you're going out to a restaurant, you're going to a party. Ask yourself, what do I want to bring to this experience? What sort of energy do I want to bring into this experience? A lot of people, if you don't create this intention for yourself, then you end up going in with fear. Oh my gosh, I'm afraid. Or you let that automatic part of your brain be in control, which is then just thinking about the food and what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat. And here's maybe all these foods that you never allow yourself to eat, and it all becomes very overwhelming. But if you go in with an intention, what do you want to create for yourself? That is then what you will create. So let that energy be your guide. If you get there and you notice your energy kind of being all over the place, you're being, you notice a lot of food chatter, that's really a barometer. There's something here I need to work on. When you're feeling something, let's say you're feeling really stressed out, and you're kind of starting to have that chatter of like, maybe we could go eat something. You can check in. Is this signaling a need for rest or something else? Maybe there's something else my body is asking for other than food. And if we can just open up and be curious to it, it can again be a barometer. So we want to just use your energy as a barometer. There will never be a time that your energy is 100% always lined up with what you want for yourself. But when it is not aligned, it tells you something is going on. It is feedback. So we don't want to use this as fuel for self-judgment of, this isn't the energy I want. Okay, that means there's something here for me. Here's what I want you to know. Your energy is your responsibility. As soon as you notice it. Now, if we talk about our nervous system, sometimes we get triggered and, we don't, in that moment, we can't really control. We don't really even know what's happening. But as soon as you have awareness about your own energy, it is now your responsibility to respond to it. You have your barometer. Now, if you have an intention for where you want to be, that becomes your compass. So this energy can be both your compass, creating an intention. What do you want for yourself in this year? And then it's also a barometer. If it's not there, there's something going on. And as soon as I'm aware, as soon as I notice it, it is my responsibility to go back towards my compass to what I want for myself. Now, this isn't always easy to do on your own. We have these patterns. We have these places that our brains and our bodies and our minds and our nervous systems go because they've done it repeatedly. And sometimes that takes somebody else being able to see it for you to help you shift, to help you change these patterns. That is what working with a coach, working with somebody else who has this experience, who has been there and who can see what you can't see on your own. But for now, think about what intention do you want for yourself in this year, in 2025? And with that, you can choose a word of the year based on your desired energy. What do I want for myself? So some words might be flow. It might be ease, connection, peace, trust, intention. You could have a word intention, intentional, as your intention. You can totally do that. My word of the year this year is Jubilee. And there's an amazing reason and story for it. But we're coming close to about as long as I want to be talking for this podcast episode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave you a link in the show notes for a blog post that I just wrote this week about my word of the year. So you can learn about why I chose Jubilee. And I would love to hear from you. I want to know, what is your word for the year? So click on the link in the show notes to that blog post. You can read about my word of the year and Jubilee, and I would love to hear from you. What is your word of the year? All right. Let your energy be your guide. Whenever you are listening to this podcast, it can always be your guide. It can be your compass and your barometer. That's what I have for you today. I'll see you next week. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, you will love my new book, The Binge Eating Breakthrough: Why Food Isn't the Problem and What Really Is. Discover why willpower isn't the answer, why restricting certain foods often backfires, and why understanding your brain and body is the key to lasting change. Learn to shift from shame and self-blame to curiosity and compassion. Get it today at janepilger.com/book.